DOJ sent out a raft of new subpoenas this week we're just learning about. Subpoenas of former Trump White House and campaign officials, reportedly in relation to Trump's Save America PAC, as well as the so-called fake elector scheme. Top Trump policy advisor and speechwriter Stephen Miller and Trump's White House political director Brian Jack were among those subpoenaed. That's according to a brand new report that broke just about an hour ago from New York Times. Trump's PAC is an issue that the January 6th committee has been focused on for months. In fact, they've argued that Trump solicited hundreds of millions of dollars in donations for what he claimed was a legal defense fund to help pay the legal expenses of his efforts to overturn the election, when in reality, such a fund simply never existed. Instead, Trump allegedly just directed the money to his PAC, where it was then funneled to a number of pro-Trump groups run by his allies. Listen to how the January 6th committee described it this spring.
Between Election Day and January 6th, the Trump campaign sent millions of fundraising emails to Trump supporters, sometimes as many as 25 a day. The emails claimed the, quote, left-wing mob was undermining the election, implored supporters to, quote, step up to protect the integrity of the election, and encouraged them to, quote, fight back. But as the Select Committee has demonstrated, the Trump campaign knew these claims of voter fraud were false, yet they continued to barrage small-dollar donors with emails, encouraging them to donate to something called the Official Election Defense Fund. The Select Committee discovered no such fund existed.
Okay, so you're tracking that, right? They raise all this money saying the election's stolen, donate to legal defense fund. They get $250 million, $250 million from these small donors. Then they create this new Save America Super PAC. The money goes there and then goes to all other kinds of stuff. Now, the fact the Department of Justice has subpoenaed people associated with this is really, really interesting for a number of reasons. First, because fundraising has basically been the only thing Donald Trump has ever in his life been really, truly, remarkably good at. Almost all of his other life's enterprises, save for playing a business mogul on a reality show, have been middling to failures. But Trump has been wildly successful at hoovering up donations from the MAGA faithful. It's what he does best. So much so that his fundraising enterprise is one of the largest in the country. You might remember there was even a whole other investigation at Trump's inaugural committee, which also raised huge amounts of money over the alleged misuse of funds. While our modern campaign finance laws allow for lots of shady behavior, and I mean lots, there are still some clear lines. Explicitly lying to people about where the money they're donating to you will go, for instance, to an entity that does not exist, may cross one of them. Not clear if it does, but it may. And that is, of course, what the January 6th committee alleges Trump did with truly enormous amounts of money. Now, take a step back for a second, because there are so many concurrent investigations into Donald Trump, it can be difficult to keep them straight. So just to reset the table, right, there's also the grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia, investigating potentially criminal election interference by Trump and his allies. We know his close associate and lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who was integral in plotting Trump's coup attempt, has been formally notified by the DA's office there that he is a target of that criminal inquiry. So that's one. Two, there's the federal inquiry into roughly 100 stolen classified documents which received from Mar-a-Lago after the FBI executed a search warrant, apparently in response to Trump's own lawyers lying about what he still had in his possession, including, it appears, according to one report, documents related to a foreign country's nuclear weapons, so sensitive only cabinet-level officials could okay being read into it. There's also, of course, the House Select Committee investigation into January 6th insurrection, which should pick up steam this fall. But the third criminal inquiry, right? There's Georgia, there's the documents. The third one, this investigation, partly into Trump's super PAC that we are learning more about today, is part of the Department of Justice's overarching investigation into January 6th and the attempted coup, and now potentially fraud as well. That's being run out of D.C., where there's a grand jury taking a lot of testimony. Now, here to me is the other really striking thing about this development, right? Trump's crime, in colloquial layman sense, is obvious. I don't mean crime in like the technical sense. I mean, Donald Trump tried to overturn the results of a free and fair election, disrupted the peaceful transfer of power for the first time, arguably in modern American history, at least since the Civil War, by inciting a violent armed mob to storm the Capitol on his behalf. He wanted to join the mob and be at the front of them while they stormed the Capitol to overturn American democracy. That's obviously wrong, bad, criminal even to the average person. From a legal perspective, prosecuting something like that is not as cut and dried as maybe it feels like it should be. There's the question of what laws he broke, what he can be charged for criminally, what kind of case you could make against him and the people around him personally for those actions, which are obviously offensive to the very core of our democratic being. That question, what can you technically prosecute, is kind of adjacent to the raw facts of the situation. But fraud, one of those areas of the law, it seems much more cut and dried. There are paper trails, documents, wire transfers, which can lay out a criminal case much more clearly. And this new line of inquiry should inspire some worry in Trump's already overstretched legal team. Because look no further than Steve Bannon in New York yesterday in handcuffs. Steve Bannon is currently awaiting trial for his alleged role in another scheme to defraud Trump supporters, probably the very same donors giving money to the super PAC that Trump was raiding for. In Bannon's case, it was a bogus campaign to crowdfund Trump's border wall, which, despite his promises to the contrary, Trump was unable to get Mexico to pay for. The organizer of that campaign, called We Build the Wall, promised not to take a cut of the money raised, but he was secretly skimming hundreds of thousands of dollars off the top, which Bannon allegedly helped him launder. So that organizer, again, raising money from the MAGA faithful, skimming money off the top, that organizer and another associate have already pleaded guilty to federal charges and potentially face years in prison when they are sentenced later this year. And things aren't looking great for Bannon, seen here in handcuffs in a New York courthouse. It's early, of course. He's innocent until proven guilty under the U.S. Constitution. The case against him seems pretty strong. And the broad strokes of what he's accused of doing, taking money from Trump supporters under misleading pretenses, looks awfully similar to what the DOJ now appears to be investigating Trump's PAC for. Based on what we've seen so far, I think Trump should be worried.